gentlest reader, Penelope Featherington, is Lady Whistledown. And we see Penelope struggle throughout this entire season with the idea that she might have to let go of her dream of being a writer in order to marry the man that she has loved since she was a child. And it is this reality that women are constantly being told they need to face, that they can't have the career and the thing that they love as well as the person that they love. That dream is something not only impossible, but something that just shouldn't even be dreamed of in the first place. And Penelope is ahead of her time. Women were not supposed to go and have careers or make money. They were supposed to be obedient and to sit at home at their parents' house until they sat in the home of their husband's house. But this was not the path that Penelope wanted, and that is exactly why Lady Whistledown came into reality. And she had no idea when she first started that anybody would even care what she had to write, but there was something in her that wanted to share with the world. And the reality is that less than 50 years ago was when women were allowed to own property, to get higher paying jobs, to live a life outside of what a man allowed them to. So Penelope is ahead of her time, but is this the question that women are still being forced to face? Either step up, shut up, and do what is told of you, or forge your own path and live as this brooding person who takes on the world but does it at the expense of being alone. Is there a reality where you can get both sides, be in love with somebody and care for them and truly want them in your life, but also have a career or a hobby that becomes the thing that moves you forward? That is a thing that you love. Penelope struggled with this idea of having to let go of Lady Whistledown, and you could tell that she really wasn't going to let it go without a fight or without a really good reason. And she was presented multiple times throughout all of season 3, and especially throughout the second half, that this is something that she might have to do. And why not? The Bridgertons had a lot of money, and she loved Colin, and she would eventually become friends with Eloise again. And yet, being a writer was still something that she held on to with such fervor. And when we look at the society we live in today, this is the same question constantly being posed to women. Oh, you want a career? Well, you can't also be a successful mother and wife. You have to pick one or the other, or you can't have them both at the same time. And that may be true, that you can't have everything all at once, but it doesn't mean that you can't have all the things that you enjoy, and that you might be in different seasons of your life where enjoying one thing is more important than enjoying another. So when you are faced with this decision of which one do I pick right now, you have to realize that you are picking something for right now, and you don't have to pick it for the rest of your life. Just as you make choices every single day of what you eat and where you go, you are making the same decision of who you want to be. The choices you make today will bring you to the person you're going to be 5 years from now, but that person 5 years from now is not going to be the person you are today. Your life is constantly changing and being redirected by the choices you make. So if today you can make choices that are more authentic to you, that is what you should do. If you are being forced to face this idea that you need to get married or that everyone else is, so you should be, but you feel like, but this isn't exactly where I want to go right now. I want to explore being a creative, creating a career, or traveling, and that is okay. And that is something that is never told to Penelope, that it's okay for her to not want what everybody else wants. And it takes a great deal of bravery to go after the world and the person that you want to be. They tell you that you can't be wearing the pretty crown with the flowers and the pretty flowing dresses and want to be a lawyer who is winning cases every day. They tell you that you can't be all of these things, and it is because they want you, they being society at large, wants you to be something that is easily understood. And as we've seen, Penelope and all of the other women in Bridgerton are not easily understood. They are people who are going to change and to develop and to become. So seeing Penelope have to face this idea that, man, I don't want to just give this all up because I love him. And I think it was really smart that they had someone that she loved for a long time be the person that she might have to give up. So not only was this a dream that she had for a long time, but this was also a person she knew for a long time. And which one was going to win? In her ideal world, it was going to be a new version of herself that emerged, a version of herself that could see herself be married, and a version of herself that could stand the idea of being a different kind of creative. Most likely have to get used to the idea that the things that you want might not be what everyone else wants for you. And though that's okay, it only matters if you understand that that's okay. Penelope had to decide that the reality that everyone wanted for her was not the path that she was going to follow. And she was the shy one, the quiet one, the one that no one expected anything of. And yet, in secret, she was holding such power. And so were all the other women if they would ever be able to accept that of themselves. So when the world is telling you who you should be, it takes a great deal of acceptance of yourself to say, you know what, that might be what you want, but that's not what I want. And you have to decide for yourself that that's exactly what's going to happen. You have to be okay with saying, you know what, maybe that was what you had to do and that's awful, but this is my life and I get to choose it how I want to. And there's going to be expectations from your parents, from friends, and from others around you. It is up to you to decide what it is that you're going to do with your life. Are you going to put on the makeup or the costume, or are you going to put on the reality of who you are, which might include those things, but it might not. And only you get to answer what is authentic to you. So how are you going to continue to be authentic to the version of yourself that you've always wanted to be? What questions are you going to ask? And what decisions are you going to make? And these are decisions that you will have to face the consequences of. She might have to realize at some point that being a writer has to come at the expense of something, and it might be the expense of the version of herself as a writer that she was, or it might be at the expense of having the life everyone else has. But until she is honest with herself, everything else around her will crumble or fall apart, and she will be at the center of blame. Once you accept who you are, it'll be easier for others to accept who you are because they understand which version of you they're talking to. You have to get good with the idea that the past is in the past and we have to move on. We have to let go of the version of ourselves that others expected us to be. And until we fully embrace ourselves without all the lies and the explanations and the desires to make everybody else feel better, we'll actually be able to get to a point where others can accept who we are and love us for who we actually are. And Colin eventually figured out that Lady Whistledown and Penelope were the same person, that she couldn't actually disconnect. And if you've ever watched any other show that has a main character who is going against the grain, it's the same conclusion, that they are actually both of those people at the same time. Supergirl was actually Kara Danvers and Supergirl, and you couldn't separate the two. And this is true for all of us. There's versions of ourselves that we can't actually separate ourselves from. If you're a writer and a lawyer and love fashion, you are all of those things at the same time, and different versions of you might be coming out to the world at different times, but it is still you at all of them. They are just different parts of who you are. So when Penelope decided to say, you know what, world, I understand this is what you expected of me, but this is what I want from my life, other people were actually able to embrace her. Eloise came back into her life. Colin understood that this is the girl he had always loved, and she got the world that she wanted. She had to retire the name Lady Whistledown, but then she got to embrace who she actually always was, which is Penelope Bridgerton. And if you have watched the show, you have realized the same thing. She became everything she wanted to be only after she had let go of the past and what others' expectations of her were. This is the truth behind all of these movies that we've watched. The ones who struggled the most were the ones who tried to hold on to an ideal or version of themselves that wasn't who they actually were or wasn't serving them. So you can let go of the guilt or you can hold on to it, but the only thing you're holding on to is a life that you don't want. So the burden of the past can only hold on to us as long as we hold on to it. And we can choose to let it go at any moment and at any point. Penelope did, and look at the life she created. But not only did she have to let go of all the lies, she had to let go of the persona she created in order to let the persona of who she actually is shine through and become who she always wanted to be. Now she lives a beautiful life with a beautiful baby, and she gets to be everything she always wanted to be. So who do you want to be and why? Now there is also a very important character who is turned into a villain, or is she just facing the consequences of her choices? Cressida Cowper is very much the villain of Bridgerton, and we see that she gets what is coming to her at the end of the season. But is her origin story one that is actually pure evil, or did it turn her into the way that she is? We see her interact more with her mother as the season continues, and we see that her mother is a very big part of why Cressida has become who she is. And that is the main point. Can we overcome what others have taught us to be? Can we blame others? Is it really somebody else's fault, or is it our own decisions? We see that Cressida's mother told her that she can't trust any women and that she is in this on her own. And she sees this very clearly when she sits at the mirror and her mother stands behind her. And as her mother walks away, she is realizing how true that actually is. And that is the very dark truth, is that no matter what you grew up with, no matter who your parents were, it is up to you to decide which version of yourself you're going to embrace and become. Penelope very much could have just been somebody who was married off and left, but she decided to embrace writing and reading and to become a different version of herself that her mother could never have imagined. And yet Cressida became the exact person she was raised to be, and everyone hated her for it. But how can we hate somebody who is exactly what society has turned them into? Can we blame them, or can we blame somebody else? And when we're running out of people to blame, whose fault is it and responsibility to deal with it? And in the end, the Cressida villain ended up dealing with the consequences of trying to be Lady Whistledown, and she came out with a scathing paper about the Bridgertons where she pretty much attacked them at every level, and Eloise very clearly was like, I cannot be friends with you anymore. You attacked my family. And Cressida had lost the one person she was connected to. Her mother could not care less and said, well, I have to protect myself too. I'm not going to go against what your father wants. And we see that Cressida does have to go and live with her aunt at the end of the day. Our villain story is one that can come about easily, and we can blame everyone. We can try to embrace other identities that aren't ours. We can lie our ways into certain things, but then we also have to deal with the consequences of those choices. So the villain is honestly only a few steps from becoming the person they are, and therefore so are the rest of us. We have to realize that what happened has happened, and that once we continue to make choices that uphold what has happened, it becomes our fault and our problem to deal with. So Cressida fell to those same decisions over and over again. She made everybody an enemy, and then she had to deal with the consequences. Her mom wasn't going to save her, and none of her friends were going to save her because she didn't have any. She turned on everyone, and though there was moments where she tried to be nice, it was too far gone. Once you have made a pattern of your behaviors, it's going to take a lot more work than a few nice words to change people's view. And yes, we can live outside of what other people think and restart our lives, and that is the privilege that we have, but is not one that Cressida did. She wanted to win the money from the Queen so that she can go to London and start her own life separate from everything that was expected of her, but she couldn't do it. She couldn't achieve the thing that she wanted by lying and forcing her way to that point. She had to stand on her own ideals and her own behavior, and it didn't leave her much to stand on. So our story can go into many different paths, but once we are most authentic to ourselves, we are able to deal with the reality of what's going on. So the villain became the villain and could not see herself out of that situation. Penelope was able to get out of it, but because her authenticity did not constantly exist by hurting other people. Yet Lady Whistledown did hurt other people. So is there a lot more similarities between Cressida and Penelope that we just want to overlook because Cressida did have the favor of society by being the pretty, tall one who could have been married off at that point, but she chose not to be, and so did Penelope. But we see Cressida as the villain because that was where she was forced to be based off of where she was raised, and because she couldn't go against it after a certain point. And when she did, she had to deal with the consequences of her choices up until then. And that is true. We can try to reinvent ourselves, but that doesn't mean that the choices we made before are suddenly gone. We will still have to face those consequences. And the villain is able to become the hero of their own story, but they have to do it in their own right and in their own time. Cressida isn't going to change until she is forced to, and now that her life is in exile, she might have the opportunity to change, and who knows, maybe season 4 will bring her back and Eloise, and we'll see their stories on the center stage. We see that Penelope has gotten the happy ending. She has a baby, she has her writing, she has the guy she loves, and yet Cressida has nothing. The villain got what she deserved, but did her origin story come from the same place the origin of most women being the evil person are? They did what they could with what society gave them, and when they tried to go against it, society doubled down and said, no, this is your life. And she didn't want to get married. She wanted to go and live her own life, but her parents refused to care, and she didn't see any way out. She did what was told of her. She sat there and she was pretty, and she was told that she would get a husband. And when the 3rd year in a row she didn't, her parents grew weary and they decided to throw her out. And when she wanted to pretend to be this gossip blogger, it spelled doom. So the villain has been slain, but who will rise from those ashes? Featherington-Bridgerton wedding has happened, and the happy couple are living together. But it was not such a happy union when he found out that she was Lady Whistledown. This threw a wrench in everything. He thought he knew her and everything about her, and yet the thing that she held the dearest, he had no idea about. What do we do when the person that we care about the most holds back something from us that is actually a big part of who they are? Can we trust them? Can we move on? And most importantly, how can we get to a point where we're honest enough with ourselves that the people around us can trust that we're being honest? Penelope had hidden various parts about herself throughout the entire show. She didn't want people to see who she was and what she was capable of. And that created a version of her in people's minds that didn't necessarily match up to reality. So the wedding happened anyway. Colin decided to honor his word and say, I am gonna marry you because that's what I said I would do. And that is something that continues to happen to this day, is people are getting married for various reasons. There are people who live a variety of ways of living for many reasons, and that is a decision that you get to make. But especially back then, having a marriage was one of the most important things that anyone could do, and was still important for men. We saw at the beginning of the season 2 people who had entered society who were married were wondering how can they play along with the game, and someone told them, you know what, you guys are married, you don't actually have to play the game anymore. You get to do whatever you want because you're married and you've achieved this different status. And that is something that is continued to this day. Once you have a husband or a wife, you enter into what seems like a different status. And even if you get divorced, you still belong to the ranks that everybody should want to be a part of. But that wedding that they had was very small and very intimate, and so was the wedding that Francesca had. It was very small, and she got to experience it the way she wanted to. And she also got married very quickly, and that was just how it went in those days. People got married quickly, and then they got to know each other after the wedding. But the wedding has always been the major part of all of these shows, is when they get married, it changes who they are. It transforms them into a different version of themselves. They're more mature, they're elegant. They are what society has always expected people to become. That marriage enters you into a group of elites, and that it's done. You've done the hardest thing. And yet they openly talk about how marriage was harder after the fact and that they still had to work on it, especially with the Bridgerton brother who had gotten married last season. They had to figure it out and work on it. And that is the reality. There is always going to be somebody who tells you it's always easier on the other side of where you are right now. That if you just put in a little more work, you're gonna get the thing you've always wanted. That it's not as hard as everyone makes it out to be, that it is easy to get rich quick. And these are all scams that are constantly being force-fed to us. That you're gonna be happier once you meet somebody and settle down, and then once you get to a certain point, they're like, just get married to anyone. It'll be better than being alone. And the reality is that there is so much more to every single individual than meets the eye. And when we can't be honest with ourselves, we can't bring an honest partnership together. There is no amount of love and fun vacations that would have prepared Penelope or Colin for what was ahead after he found out that she was Lady Whistledown. And it wasn't until they were true and honest with one another and their most authentic selves could they get to a point where they could create an even bigger love into their life. So if you're being forced to face this idea that you have to face a certain career path, you need to get married, you need to live in a certain town, understand that you're going to keep attracting people that aren't going to care about who you are because they don't know who you are. And until you get to understand who you actually are, you will also never be able to accept the greatest version of yourself. The authenticity that comes with accepting who you are is one that is going to bring in the right people into your life. And that authenticity is something you're going to work on for the rest of your life. Every year you're different and you learn new things about yourself. But as long as you want to keep learning, you'll keep attracting the right people in your life. It doesn't matter what somebody else does or doesn't want or what society expects of you. At the end, we are the society that expects of people. So what are you expecting of yourself? How are you living the greatest version of your life? We can wait for a wedding, we can wait for the person, but we'll someday realize that that wait was in vain because the wait is our lives. It is right now, right here, that matters more than anything. Who are you going to be? Who are you going to choose to be? What decisions are you going to make it the greatest version of yourself? Penelope had to let go of who she was in order to create the exact life she's always wanted. And she got everything she dreamed of. She got the guy and she got the baby and she got her writing as herself, which was more than Lady Whistledown ever was able to offer her. She became exactly who she wanted to be on all fronts and she got everything she wanted. And what is holding us back from getting the thing that we've always wanted? Penelope had to stand up at a time where women were not supposed to have dreams or goals or aspirations. They weren't supposed to want things or to pursue anything. They were supposed to do as they were always meant to, which was to be at home and serve the men in their life. But she didn't want that. And she found somebody who cared for her as she is. And that is what we're all looking for, is to find the people who accept us for ourselves, and we have to be that first person to accept ourselves as we truly are. All the people who left, all the people who weren't meant to stay, are exactly where they should be too, not in your life, because you were not the person who you have always meant to be when those people were around. And there's very much versions of ourselves that have to fall away in order for the greatest version of ourselves to come up, and that is what will happen, but we have to let go of everything that comes before. Bridgerton this season was all about authenticity and the actual consequences behind not being authentic to who we wanted to be. We saw Cressida try to be authentic in some ways when she was really sweet to Eloise, or, when she had to face certain decisions. And her deciding to come out as Lady Whistledown was a choice she was forced into, or at least she believed she had to make. When we are living by the beliefs that others do, we are forcing ourselves into a small box that we don't understand because it's not meant to be ours. Did you watch Bridgerton? Have you had to face the music of your decisions? Let me know down below and